My name is Gabrielle, and I am 32 years old. I still remember standing in my empty kitchen that Thanksgiving evening, staring at the cold stove where a turkey should have been roasting. I had just returned from a work trip expecting to find my husband Derek preparing our holiday meal. Instead, I found his stepfather Harold sitting alone in the darkness of our living room. The words he spoke that night shattered everything I believed about my marriage and the man I had loved for 5 years. Before I begin this story, let me know where you are watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Stay with me through this journey because sometimes the people we trust the most are hiding secrets that could destroy us. And sometimes a stranger becomes the one person brave enough to tell us the truth. 5 years ago, my life looked completely different. I was 27 working long shifts as a nurse at a major hospital in Portland, Oregon. My days blended together in an exhausting rhythm of 12-hour shifts, quick meals, eaten, standing up and falling asleep the moment my head touched the pillow. I had accepted that romance was something that happened to other people, not to women who smelled like antiseptic and wore compression socks. Then Derek walked into my life. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in early March. I was sitting in a small coffee shop 2 blocks from the hospital, enjoying my 30-minute break between patients. The place was nearly empty, just me and an elderly couple sharing a scone near the window. I had my phone out scrolling mindlessly through emails when the bell above the door chimed. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark brown hair that curled slightly at his temples. His eyes were the color of coffee, without cream, warm and alert. He wore a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms that suggested he spent time outdoors, despite his office job appearance. As he walked toward the counter, his elbow caught the edge of my table. My half-finished latte wobbled, then tipped, spilling across the wooden surface and dripping onto my scrubs. I gasped, jumping back, but the damage was already done. A brown stain spread across my light blue pants. He turned around his face, transforming from confusion to horror in the span of a heartbeat. "Oh my God," he said, grabbing napkins from the dispenser on my table. "I am so sorry. I did not even see your table there. Please let me help." He dabbed at the table while I tried to blot my pants, both of us apologizing to each other in that awkward dance strangers do when personal space gets violated unexpectedly. "At least it was not hot anymore," I said, attempting to lighten the mood. He looked up at me, and for a moment our eyes met. He had the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room, even when you were covered in lukewarm coffee. "Let me buy you another one," he insisted, "and probably pay for your dry cleaning, and possibly move to another country out of embarrassment." I laughed despite myself. "It is fine, really. These scrubs have seen much worse than coffee." His eyebrows lifted. "You work at the hospital," I nodded. "Nurse." "Emergency department." "That explains the superhuman patience," he said. "Anyone else would have thrown the cup at me by now." He bought me a new latte, and when I told him I only had 15 minutes left on my break, he asked if he could sit with me. His name was Derek, he told me, and he worked as a software engineer for a tech company downtown. He had moved to Portland 3 years earlier from a small town a few hours away, drawn by the job market and the promise of city life. By the time I had to leave, we had exchanged phone numbers. By the end of the week, we had our first official date at an Italian restaurant overlooking the Willamette River. Those first months were magical in a way I had never experienced before. Derek was attentive in ways that surprised me. He remembered that I preferred white wine over red. He knew my schedule better than I did, texting me good luck before difficult shifts and asking about specific patients I had mentioned in passing. He brought flowers to the hospital on random Tuesdays, not because it was a special occasion, but because he said Tuesdays were hard, and I deserved something beautiful. We traveled together during my rare vacation days. a weekend in San Francisco, where we walked across the Golden Gate Bridge in the fog. A trip to Yellowstone, where we watched Old Faithful erupt while eating sandwiches packed in his truck. A Christmas visit to New York City ice skating at Rockefeller Center, like tourists, despite our West Coast cynicism. After 2 years of dating, Derek proposed on Christmas Eve. We were at his stepfather Harold's house, decorating the tree together. Harold had stepped into the kitchen to refill our mugs with hot chocolate when Derek got down on one knee beside the twinkling lights. "Gabrielle," he said, his voice steady but his hands trembling as he held open a small velvet box. "I have spent my whole life feeling like something was missing. Then I spilled coffee on you, and suddenly everything made sense. Will you marry me?" The ring was simple but elegant. A princess-cut diamond on a white gold band. I said yes before he even finished the question. Our wedding was small, held in a garden venue outside Portland the following June. I wore my mother's dress altered to fit my frame. Derek wore a navy suit that made his brown eyes look almost golden in the afternoon light. Harold stood as Derek's best man, tears streaming down his weathered face as he watched his stepson exchange vows. We bought a house in the suburbs shortly after, a 3-bedroom craftsman with a wrap-around porch and a backyard big enough for the children we planned to have someday. I painted the kitchen yellow because Derek said it reminded him of sunshine. He built raised garden beds for the vegetables I wanted to grow. We adopted a cat named Biscuit, who slept at the foot of our bed every night. I need to tell you about Harold because he becomes important later. Harold married Derek's mother, Linda, when Derek was 7 years old. Derek's biological father had abandoned the family when Derek was only 4, disappearing without a trace and never sending so much as a birthday card. Linda struggled as a single mother, working 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads until she met Harold at a church potluck. Harold was a carpenter by trade, a quiet man with calloused hands and a gentle spirit. He never tried to replace Derek's absent father, but he showed up in all the ways that mattered. He taught Derek how to ride a bike, how to throw a football, how to change a tire. He sat in the front row at every school play and graduation ceremony. When Derek got accepted into college, Harold took out a second mortgage on his house to help pay the tuition. Linda passed away from breast cancer 3 years before I met Derek. Harold was devastated, but he channeled his grief into maintaining his relationship with his stepson. Every holiday we drove the 2 hours to Harold's small house in the countryside. Every summer, Harold came to Portland to visit us, bringing homemade jam from his garden and wooden spoons he had carved himself. I loved Harold like a father. My own parents had divorced when I was 16, and my relationship with my biological father had grown distant over the years. He had moved to Florida with his new wife and seemed content to communicate only through occasional text messages on holidays. Harold filled that void in ways he probably never realized. He asked about my work, remembered my patients' names, and always told me I was too good for his son, though he said it with a smile that suggested he was mostly joking. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs I missed during those first 3 years of marriage. Derek rarely talked about his past. When I asked about his college years or former girlfriends, he would give vague answers and quickly change the subject. "The past does not matter," he would say. "All that matters is us right here, right now." I found it romantic at the time, this man who was so focused on our future that he did not waste energy dwelling on what came before. I did not realize he was not being romantic. He was hiding something. There were the business trips, too. Derek traveled for work frequently, sometimes 2 or 3 times a month. He said it was part of his job, meeting with clients and attending conferences in different cities. I believed him because I had no reason not to. He always came home with gifts and stories about boring hotel rooms and terrible airline food. Sometimes his phone would ring late at night, and he would slip out of bed to take the call in another room. Work emergency, he would whisper when he crawled back under the covers. Server issues. You know how it is, I did not know how it was. Actually. But I trusted him. That was my mistake. There were evenings he came home later than expected, smelling faintly of a perfume that was not mine. Business dinner, he would explain. The client's wife was wearing something strong. You know how some people overdo it with fragrance. I always accepted his explanations. I never questioned, never doubted, never demanded more. Because Derek was my husband, and husbands do not lie to their wives about things that matter. At least that is what I believed. The nursing conference in Seattle was scheduled months in advance. 3 days of seminars on emergency care protocols and networking events with colleagues from across the Pacific Northwest. I was not particularly excited about it, but my supervisor had encouraged me to attend for professional development. Derek and I planned our Thanksgiving carefully around my trip. Harold would arrive at our house on Wednesday evening, and Derek would pick me up from the airport Thursday morning, so I could help with the final cooking preparations. We would eat together that afternoon, the three of us like we did every year. It was supposed to be perfect. It was supposed to be a celebration of family and gratitude and all the blessings we had accumulated over 5 years together. I left for Seattle on a Monday morning, kissing Derek goodbye at the front door while my taxi waited in the driveway. I will miss you, I told him. 3 days, he said, it will fly by, and when you get back we will have the best Thanksgiving ever. The conference was exactly as boring as I expected. Fluorescent lit ballrooms filled with folding chairs and PowerPoint presentations, name tags and handshakes, and small talk about staffing shortages and burnout rates. I attended the required sessions, took notes I would probably never read again, and counted the hours until I could go home. On Tuesday night, I texted Derek a photo of my sad hotel room dinner, a wilted salad, and a cup of soup from the lobby cafe. Miss you, I wrote. Cannot wait for real food on Thursday. His response came 2 hours later. Miss you too, babe. House is too quiet without you. On Wednesday, his texts became shorter and less frequent. I assumed he was busy preparing for Harold's arrival, cleaning the house and buying groceries for our Thanksgiving feast. I did not think anything was wrong. Thursday morning, I woke up early to catch my flight. I had managed to book an earlier connection that would get me home by 1 in the afternoon instead of 5 in the evening. I wanted to surprise Derek to walk through the door while he was still in his pajamas and see the look of joy on his face. I texted him from the airport. Flight boarding soon. Cannot wait to see you. He did not respond. I texted again when we landed in Portland. Just touched down. Home in about 45 minutes. Still nothing. I told myself he was probably busy in the kitchen. Maybe his phone was in another room. Maybe Harold had arrived early and they were deep in conversation about football or woodworking or whatever men talked about when women were not around. The taxi dropped me off at 2:15 that afternoon. Derek's car was parked in the driveway exactly where it should have been. The house looked normal from the outside, quiet and peaceful in the pale November sunlight. I paid the driver and pulled my small suitcase up the walkway, fishing my keys from my purse. The front door was unlocked, which was unusual. Derek was paranoid about security and always kept the deadbolt engaged, even when he was home. Derek? I called out as I stepped inside. I am home early. Surprise. Silence. The entryway was dark. I flipped on the light switch and wheeled my suitcase against the wall. The house felt strange, like the air itself was holding its breath. Derek Harold. Is anyone home? I walked into the kitchen expecting to find my husband elbow deep in turkey preparation. Instead, I found cold countertops and an empty sink. No turkey, no side dishes, no evidence that anyone had started cooking anything at all. My heart began to beat faster. Something was wrong. I checked the dining room, the guest bedroom where Harold usually stayed, the upstairs bathroom. All empty. all silent. Finally, I pushed open the door to the living room. Harold was sitting on the sofa in the darkness. The curtains were drawn, blocking out the afternoon sun. He was completely still, his hands folded in his lap, staring at nothing. "Harold," I said, my voice cracking, "what is going on? Where is Derek?" He looked up at me slowly like a man waking from a deep sleep. His eyes were red-rimmed, and there were deep shadows beneath them that I had never noticed before. "Gabrielle," he said, "you are home." "Where is Derek?" I repeated. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" Harold did not answer immediately. Instead, he reached over and turned on the lamp beside the sofa. Yellow light spilled across his face, revealing an expression I could not quite read. Sadness. Yes, but also something else. Something that looked almost like guilt. "Derek is gone," he said finally. "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" "Gone where?" Harold gestured toward the coffee table. I noticed a piece of paper lying there, a note written in Derek's familiar handwriting. I picked it up with trembling hands. "Had to handle something urgent," it read. "Will explain later. Do not worry." That was it. 8 words. No details, no timeline, no explanation for why he had abandoned our Thanksgiving plans and left his elderly stepfather alone in our house. I pulled out my phone and called Derek. The line rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I called again. Same result. I sent a text message demanding to know where he was. The message showed as delivered, but not read. "Harold," I said, turning back to him, "what is happening? Do you know where he went?" Harold stood up slowly, his joints creaking with the effort. He was 62 years old, but in that moment he looked much older. The weight of something heavy pressed down on his shoulders. "Sit down, Gabrielle," he said. "There is something I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago." His voice was gentle but firm, the voice of a man who had made a difficult decision and was determined to see it through. I sank into the armchair across from him, my pulse pounding in my ears. What Harold said next changed everything. Harold settled back onto the sofa, his weathered hands clasped together as if in prayer. The lamplight cast long shadows across his face, deepening the lines around his eyes and mouth. I had known this man for 5 years, shared holidays and Sunday dinners with him, listened to his stories about Linda and his carpentry projects, but I had never seen him look so burdened. "Before I tell you this," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to understand that I love Derek. I raised that boy. I was there for his first day of high school, his college graduation, his wedding day. He is my son in every way that matters." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "But I love you too, Gabrielle. You have been good to Derek. Better than he deserves, if I am being honest. And you deserve to know the truth about the man you married." My stomach twisted into knots. "What truth? What are you talking about?" Harold looked at me with those kind eyes that had always reminded me of my grandfather. "Before you, there was someone else, someone Derek never told you about." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean, someone else?" "Her name was Meredith." Harold spoke the name carefully, like it was fragile and might shatter if he said it too quickly. Derek met her 8 years ago when he was working at his first job out of college. She was an accountant at the same company, young, pretty, full of life. I sat frozen in my chair, unable to speak. "They dated for about 8 months, Harold continued. "Fast, I know. But Derek was always impulsive when it came to matters of the heart. He said she was the one. Said he had never felt that way about anyone before." Those words hit me like a physical blow. Derek had said those exact same things to me. "They got married in a small ceremony," Harold said. I was there. Linda was still alive then, and she was so happy to see Derek settling down. We thought everything was finally going to be okay. Married. The word echoed in my mind. Derek had been married before. He had stood at an altar with another woman and promised to love her forever. And he had never told me. What happened, I managed to ask. Harold's face grew darker, the lines around his mouth deepening with what looked like shame. Meredith got pregnant, he said, about a year into the marriage. She was thrilled. Talked about nothing but baby names and nursery colors and all the things new mothers dream about. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, though I was not sure why. Perhaps it was the image of this unknown woman so excited about starting a family with the man who would become my husband. But Derek Harold said, his voice growing harder. Derek was not thrilled. He started pulling away, coming home late, picking fights over nothing. He told me he was not ready to be a father. Said he felt trapped. Trapped, I repeated. His own wife was pregnant with his child, and he felt trapped. Harold nodded slowly. When Meredith was about 7 months along, Derek left. Just like that. Packed a bag in the middle of the night and drove away. Left her a note on the kitchen table saying he needed space to figure things out. My hands were shaking now. This could not be true. This could not be the same man who brought me flowers on random Tuesdays and told me I was the love of his life. She had the baby alone, Harold continued. A little girl named Sophie. Derek was not there for the birth. Was not there for the first weeks or months. He filed for divorce when Sophie was 3 months old. Gave up his parental rights without a fight. The court ordered him to pay child support, and he did, but only the minimum required by law. I could not hold back the tears any longer. They spilled down my cheeks, hot and bitter. Why, I choked out. Why did he never tell me any of this? Because he wanted to pretend it never happened, Harold said. He moved away, started fresh, built a new life. When he met you, he saw a chance to be the man he wished he had been with Meredith. He thought he could just erase the past and start over. But the past is not something you can erase, I said. No, Harold agreed. It is not. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, trying to process what I had just learned. My husband had been married before. He had a daughter somewhere out there, a 7-year-old little girl who had never met her father, and he had lied to me about all of it. Sophie, I said softly. That is her name. Harold nodded. She lives with Meredith in a small town about 2 hours from here. Pretty little thing from the pictures I have seen. Looks just like Derek did when he was that age. A thought occurred to me, a question I was almost afraid to ask. Have you kept in touch with them? With Meredith and Sophie? Harold hesitated before answering. Meredith sends me updates sometimes. Photos, report cards, that kind of thing. She knows I had nothing to do with what Derek did. She is a good woman, Gabrielle. Better than the way my son treated her. I sat in silence for a long moment, trying to make sense of this new information. Everything I thought I knew about Derek was built on a foundation of lies. Our entire relationship, our marriage, our plans for the future, all of it was tainted by his deception. But there was still something I did not understand. Harold, I said slowly, why are you telling me this now? Why today of all days? The old man's face crumpled, and for a moment I thought he might cry. Because he said, his voice breaking, there is more, and I cannot keep quiet about it any longer. I braced myself for whatever Harold was about to say. Part of me wanted to run out of the room to plug my ears like a child and pretend none of this was happening. But I had already come too far. I needed to know the rest. Harold stood up and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain to look out at the empty street. About a year ago, he began. Derek started asking me questions about Meredith, how she was doing where she was living, whether she had remarried. At first I thought he was finally feeling guilty about what he did. I thought maybe he wanted to make amends to be a father to Sophie, even if it was 7 years too late. But that was not it, I said. It was not about guilt. Harold shook his head without turning around. No, it was not. He let the curtain fall back into place and turned to face me. Derek started visiting Meredith, secretly at first. He told you he was going on business trips, but he was driving to her town instead. He said he wanted to reconnect with Sophie, and I believed him. I thought he was finally growing up. I thought about all those business trips, all those conferences and client meetings that took Derek away from home 2 or 3 times a month. All those lies. What really happened, I asked, though I was terrified of the answer. They started seeing each other again. Harold's voice was flat, now drained of emotion. Not just as co-parents, as something more. The room seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the armrest of my chair to steady myself. He is having an affair, I whispered. With his ex-wife. Harold nodded slowly. I saw them together about 3 months ago. I had driven up to visit an old friend who lives near Meredith's town. I stopped at a restaurant for lunch, and there they were, sitting in a booth by the window, holding hands across the table, laughing, like they did not have a care in the world. What did you do? I confronted him that night. Harold's jaw tightened at the memory. He admitted everything, said he and Meredith had rekindled their relationship, that he was in love with her again, that he wanted to be a real father to Sophie. And what about me, I asked. What did he say about me? Harold looked at me with something like pity in his eyes. He said he was going to leave you, that he would file for divorce after the holidays. The words hit me like bullets, each one piercing deeper than the last. My husband was planning to leave me. He was going to wait until after Thanksgiving, after Christmas, after New Year, and then announce that our marriage was over, that he had chosen someone else. But there is something else, Harold said. Something even worse. I did not think I could take any more, but I forced myself to listen. Do you know how much money is in your joint savings account? The question caught me off guard. I had not checked the account in months. Derek handled most of our finances because my work schedule left me too exhausted to deal with bills and budgets. It should be around $90,000, I said. That is what we had saved up over the past few years. For a down payment on a bigger house, maybe? Or for when we started a family? Harold's expression darkened. Check it now. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and opened our banking app. I navigated to the savings account and waited for the balance to load. When the number appeared on the screen, I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. $11,000. That was all that remained of our life savings. Where did it go? I breathed. Harold reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something, a cell phone, with a cracked screen. Derek left this at my house last month, he explained. He forgot it on the kitchen counter and drove off before he realized. By the time he came back for it, I had already seen the messages. What messages? Harold handed me the phone. The screen was open to a text conversation between Derek and Meredith. I scrolled through the messages with growing horror. The deposit is done. One message from Derek read, $80,000. The house will be ready for us by January. Meredith had responded with a heart emoji and the words, I cannot wait for our new beginning. There was more. Messages about furniture shopping, about which bedroom Sophie would have, about the life they were planning to build together. And at the bottom of the thread, a message that made my blood run cold. Gabrielle does not know anything Derek had written. She trusts me completely. By the time she figures out what happened, we will be long gone. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring with tears. My husband had not just betrayed me. He had stolen from me. He had taken almost $80,000 money I had earned through years of 12-hour shifts and double weekends and holidays spent at the hospital instead of with my family. He had used my money to buy a house for another woman. He was never going to file for divorce, I realized out loud. He was just going to disappear. Take the money and run. Harold nodded grimly. That is what I believe. He was going to drain the account completely and vanish. By the time you figured out what happened, he would be living with Meredith and you would be left with nothing. I set the phone down on the coffee table, unable to look at it any longer. Why did you not tell me sooner? I asked. You have known about this for a month. Harold hung his head in shame. I kept hoping he would come to his senses, that he would realize what he was doing was wrong and stop before it was too late. I did not want to believe my own son could be capable of something like this. He looked up at me, his eyes glistening. But when he told me yesterday that he was going to Meredith's for Thanksgiving, instead of staying here with you, I knew I could not keep silent any longer. I drove here last night planning to tell you everything the moment you walked through the door. The depth of Derek's betrayal was staggering. Not only had he lied about his past, not only had he cheated on me with his ex-wife, but he had systematically stolen our savings and planned to abandon me without a word. He had treated me like I was disposable, like our 5 years together meant nothing. And the worst part, I had trusted him completely. I had built my entire life around a man who had never been real. I do not know how long I sat in that chair staring at nothing while the reality of my situation sank in. Minutes, maybe, or hours. Time had lost all meaning. At some point, Harold got up and made tea. He pressed a warm mug into my hands, and I drank without tasting. The liquid could have been water or battery acid for all I knew. My senses had shut down, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I had learned. Images kept flashing through my mind. Derek on our wedding day, his eyes shining as he said his vows. Derek bringing me flowers at the hospital, telling me I deserved something beautiful. Derek holding me in bed, whispering that he loved me more than anything in the world. All lies. Every smile, every touch, every word of love. Lies built on lies constructed so carefully that I never suspected the truth. I began to see our relationship differently now, like looking at a photograph, and suddenly noticing details you had missed before. The way Derek always changed the subject when I asked about his past. The defensiveness in his voice when I suggested we visit his hometown. The strange reluctance whenever I brought up having children of our own. He already had a child. He already had a family. And I was just a placeholder, a source of income, a convenient stepping stone on his way back to the life he had abandoned. How could I have been so blind? I thought about all the times I had defended Derek to my skeptical friends. My college roommate had once commented that Derek seemed too good to be true, and I had laughed off her concerns. Too good to be true meant perfect. It did not mean a liar and a thief. But that is exactly what he was. The tears came again harder this time. I cried for the marriage I thought I had. I cried for the future I thought we were building. I cried for the woman I had been 3 hours ago, happy and hopeful, rushing home to see her loving husband. That woman was gone now. She had been replaced by someone harder, someone who had learned that trust was a weapon people used against you. Eventually the tears ran dry. I sat in the empty silence, feeling hollowed out, scraped clean of everything I used to believe. Harold sat across from me, patient and quiet, giving me the space I needed to process. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, I finally said. The late nights, the business trips, the phone calls he had to take in private. I should have known something was wrong. Harold shook his head firmly. This is not your fault, Gabrielle. Derek is a skilled liar. He fooled me too, and I have known him his whole life. You cannot blame yourself for believing in someone you loved. But I feel so stupid, I whispered. You are not stupid. You are trusting. There is a difference. Harold leaned forward, his eyes intense. Trusting is not a weakness. The weakness belongs to the person who exploits that trust. I thought about Meredith then. She had trusted Derek too, once upon a time. She had married him, gotten pregnant with his child, believed they would build a life together. And he had abandoned her in her 7th month of pregnancy, left her to give birth alone. Now he was going back to her 7 years later with money stolen from his second wife. Did Meredith know where that money came from? Did she know she was building her new life on the wreckage of someone else's? I thought about Sophie, the 7-year-old girl who had never met her father. Did Derek actually want to be a part of her life now, or was she just a convenient excuse, a prop in his fantasy of starting over? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Derek had not just lied to me. He had used me. He had taken my love, my trust, my money, and he had given nothing real in return. Our entire marriage was a transaction in which I gave everything and received only deception. I could feel something shifting inside me. The numbness was fading, replaced by a heat that started in my chest and spread outward. It was anger, yes. But it was something else, too. Something that felt almost like strength. I was not going to let him get away with this. I stood up abruptly, startling Harold. "Where does Meredith live?" I asked. Harold blinked. "What you said, she lives in a small town about 2 hours from here." "What town? What is the address?" The old man hesitated. "Gabrielle, I do not know if that is a good idea. You are upset, and confronting them right now might not be the best approach." I looked at him steadily. "Harold, my husband, stole $80,000 from me. He is planning to abandon me without a word to start a new life with another woman, using money that I earned. I am not going to sit here and wait for him to make the next move. I need to look him in the eye. I need to hear him admit what he has done." Harold studied my face for a long moment. Whatever he saw there must have convinced him, because he finally nodded. "Medford," he said. "She lives just outside of Medford. I have the address in my phone." He found the information and wrote it on a piece of paper, which he handed to me with obvious reluctance. "Be careful," he said. "Derek can be charming, but he can also be dangerous when he is cornered." "I know," I said. "But I am done being careful. I am done being the trusting wife who believes every word her husband says. It is time for Derek to face the consequences of what he has done." I grabbed my car keys from the hook by the door, adrenaline pumping through my veins. Before I left, Harold caught my arm. "Gabrielle," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "whatever happens, I want you to know something. You are the best thing that ever happened to my son. He did not deserve you then, and he certainly does not deserve you now." I felt tears prick my eyes again, but I blinked them back. "Thank you, Harold, for everything. I know this could not have been easy for you." He shook his head. "It was the right thing to do. I only wish I had done it sooner." I squeezed his hand once, then turned and walked out into the fading afternoon light. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere out there, my husband was sitting down to Thanksgiving dinner with his ex-wife and their daughter, celebrating a holiday meant for family and gratitude. He had no idea I was coming. The drive to Medford took just under 2 hours. I pushed the speed limit the entire way, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The sun disappeared below the horizon as I drove, and the highway became a river of headlights and taillights stretching into the darkness. My mind raced faster than the car. I rehearsed what I would say, the accusations I would make, the questions I would demand answers to. But every time I thought I had the words right, they slipped away, replaced by raw emotion that defied language. I found the house just after 6:30. It was a modest but well-maintained ranch-style home at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. Christmas lights had already been strung along the roofline, twinkling red and green in the darkness. A warm glow emanated from the windows, and I could see shadows moving inside. Derek's car was not in the driveway, but I recognized his jacket through the window draped over the back of a dining chair. I parked across the street and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. This was it. The moment of confrontation I had been building toward for the past several hours. Whatever happened next would change the course of my life forever. I got out of the car and walked up the driveway, my heels clicking against the pavement. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet suburban evening. I rang the doorbell. For a few agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then I heard footsteps approaching and the door swung open. Derek stood in the doorway, a dish towel draped over his shoulder and a smile on his face. The smile froze when he saw me. Gabrielle, he stammered. What are you doing here? I did not answer immediately. Instead, I looked past him into the house. I could see a dining table set for 3, the remains of a Thanksgiving meal spread across its surface. A little girl with dark hair sat at the table watching us with curious eyes, and standing in the kitchen doorway, her face pale with shock, was a woman I assumed was Meredith. I am home, Derek, I said, my voice remarkably steady. From my business trip. Remember, we were supposed to have Thanksgiving together. Derek glanced nervously over his shoulder. Look, I can explain. Something came up and I had to deal with it. I was going to call you. Really? I raised an eyebrow. Your note said you would explain later. But your phone has been going straight to voicemail. Almost like you were avoiding me. The woman in the kitchen doorway stepped forward. Derek. Who is this? I turned to face her. My name is Gabrielle. I am Derek's wife. The color drained from Meredith's face. His wife Derek moved between us, hands raised in a placating gesture. Meredith, let me handle this. Gabrielle, can we talk outside? Please no, I said firmly. I am done having private conversations. I am done with secrets. I pushed past him into the house, my eyes sweeping across the domestic scene. Whoever you are, I assume you are Meredith. I assume that little girl is Sophie. And I assume you know exactly who I am and what my husband has been doing. Meredith's expression shifted from shock to something more complicated. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very small. He told me you were getting divorced, she said quietly. He said the marriage was over and you just had not signed the papers yet. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Did he also tell you where he got the $80,000 for the down payment on this house? Meredith blinked. He said it was from his savings, from his job. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app, turning the screen so she could see. This is our joint savings account. 3 months ago, it had almost $90,000. Money I saved from working double shifts at the hospital for years. Now there is barely $11,000 left. Want to guess where the rest went? Meredith stared at the screen, her face crumbling as the realization hit her. Derek, she whispered, you said that money was yours. Derek's mask was slipping now. I could see the panic in his eyes, the cornered animal calculating its escape routes. It is not what it looks like, he said. The finances are complicated. Gabrielle, you do not understand the whole picture. Then explain it to me, I demanded. Explain how you stole $80,000 from our account. Explain how you have been cheating on me for over a year. Explain how you were planning to abandon me without a word. I held up the cracked phone Harold had given me. Explain these text messages, I continued. The ones where you call Meredith the love of your life. The ones where you say, I do not matter. The ones where you plan your escape like I am nothing more than an inconvenience. Derek's face went white. Where did you get that? Your stepfather gave it to me. The man who raised you, who loved you like his own son. Even he could not stomach what you were doing. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of a clock somewhere in the house, and the soft whimper of Sophie, who had begun to sense that something was very wrong. Meredith moved to comfort her daughter, pulling the child close and covering her ears. Derek, she said, her voice shaking. Is this true? Did you steal from your wife to buy our house? Derek ran a hand through his hair, his composure finally cracking. It is complicated, okay? The money, the situation with Gabrielle, everything. I was going to sort it out. Sort it out how I asked. By disappearing. By leaving me with nothing while you played house with your ex-wife. You do not understand what it is like, Derek burst out. I made a mistake leaving Meredith and Sophie. I have regretted it every day for 7 years. When I finally had a chance to make things right, I took it. Is that so wrong? I stared at him in disbelief. Is that so wrong? You stole from me. You lied to me. You were going to abandon me. And you are asking if that is wrong. I could feel the anger boiling inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. Here is what is going to happen, I said, my voice cold and clear. I am going to call a lawyer first thing tomorrow morning. I am going to file for divorce. And I am going to make sure you pay back every cent you stole from me plus interest. Derek opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. Do not even think about fighting me on this. I have the bank records. I have the text messages. I have Harold as a witness. If you try to contest anything, I will make sure the whole world knows exactly what kind of man you are. I turned to Meredith, who was still clutching her daughter, tears streaming down her face. I feel sorry for you, I said. And I meant it. He lied to you too. He abandoned you once already. And he will do it again. That is who he is. A man who runs when things get hard. Meredith could not meet my eyes. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wedding ring. The diamond caught the light as I set it on the dining table right next to the leftover turkey. You can keep this, I said to no one in particular. Consider it a reminder of what happens when you build a life on lies. Then I turned and walked out of the house, my head held high. The drive back to Portland was the longest 2 hours of my life. The anger that had sustained me through the confrontation began to fade, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion that made my eyes heavy and my thoughts slow. I did not cry. I had cried enough for one day. Instead, I let the reality of my situation settle over me like a heavy blanket. My marriage was over. My savings were gone. The future I had planned was nothing but ashes. But as I drove through the darkness, something else began to emerge beneath the grief and exhaustion. A tiny spark of something that felt almost like relief. For years I had lived in a state of unconscious anxiety. There had always been something slightly off about my marriage, some nagging doubt I could never quite identify. I had attributed it to normal relationship stress, to the challenges of 2 busy careers, to the natural ebb and flow of love over time. Now I understood. The doubt had been real. My instincts had been trying to tell me something was wrong, and I had been too afraid to listen. But I was listening now. When I finally pulled into my driveway at nearly 9 o'clock, Harold was waiting for me on the front porch. He stood up as I approached, his face creased with worry. Are you all right? He asked. I considered the question carefully. I do not know, I admitted, but I think I will be. We went inside together, and Harold made me a plate of leftover food he had somehow managed to put together while I was gone. Turkey sandwiches with cranberry sauce, nothing fancy, but it was the first thing I had eaten all day. I was surprised to find I was starving. As I ate, I told Harold about the confrontation, the look on Derek's face when he saw me at the door. Meredith's shock when she learned the truth about the money. The quiet dignity I had somehow managed to maintain throughout the entire ordeal. Harold listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, his eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, he reached across the table and took my hand. I am proud of you, he said simply. Those 4 words meant more to me than I could express. My own father had never said them to me, not once in 32 years. But this man who was not related to me by blood, who had every reason to take his son's side, had chosen truth over loyalty. "Harold," I said, "thank you for telling me, for being here, for everything." He squeezed my hand. "You are my daughter, Gabrielle. Not by blood, not by law, but by choice. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that will never change." I felt tears threatening again, but these were different. These were tears of gratitude, of connection, of the unexpected grace that can emerge from even the darkest circumstances. The weeks that followed were difficult, but not impossible. I hired a lawyer recommended by a colleague at the hospital, a sharp woman named Patricia who specialized in divorce cases involving financial misconduct. She reviewed the evidence I had, the bank records and text messages, and assured me I had a strong case. Derek tried to call me several times in those first few days. I let every call go to voicemail. His messages started out apologetic, full of explanations and excuses. Then they turned angry, accusing me of overreacting and ruining his life. Finally, they stopped altogether. The divorce proceedings took about 5 months. Derek initially tried to contest my claims, arguing that the money in our joint account belonged to both of us equally. But Patricia was relentless. She subpoenaed bank records showing that the vast majority of deposits had come from my paychecks. She presented the text messages as evidence of his intent to defraud me. She called Harold as a witness, and he testified about everything he had told me on Thanksgiving Day. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. Derek was ordered to repay the full amount he had taken from our savings, plus interest and legal fees. I got to keep the house in Portland. The marriage was officially dissolved on a Tuesday afternoon in April, 5 months and 3 days after I had walked into our living room to find Harold sitting alone in the darkness. I learned later that Meredith had ended things with Derek shortly after our confrontation. Apparently, she had done some digging of her own and discovered that he had lied to her about more than just the money. He had told her I was abusive, that I was the one who had driven him away, that he was only staying in the marriage out of fear. When she realized none of it was true, whatever feelings she had rekindled for him turned to dust. Last I heard, Derek had moved to another state, trying once again to outrun his past. I imagine he will find another woman eventually, someone else to charm and deceive. The thought makes me sad, not for myself, but for whoever she turns out to be. As for me, I have spent the past year learning how to live alone for the first time in my adult life. It has not been easy. There were nights when the silence of the empty house felt suffocating. Mornings when I reached across the bed for someone who was not there. Moments when I caught myself wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. But there were good moments, too. Dinners with friends who rallied around me in my time of need. Promotions at work that I had earned through my own hard work and dedication. Small discoveries about myself, things I liked and wanted and dreamed about that had been buried beneath years of trying to be the perfect wife. I started seeing a therapist, a patient woman named Dr. Simmons, who helped me work through the trauma of betrayal and the complicated process of rebuilding trust, starting with myself. I learned to recognize the ways I had ignored my own instincts, the red flags I had explained away because I wanted so badly to believe in the fairy tale. I also learned to forgive myself for those mistakes. I had loved Derek with my whole heart. That love had been real, even if the man I loved had not been. There is no shame in being deceived by someone who devoted years to perfecting their deception. Harold and I remained close. He visited me in Portland every few months, and I drove out to see him in between. We never talked much about Derek by unspoken agreement. He was a chapter we had both closed. Instead, we talked about Linda, about Harold's carpentry projects, about the books I was reading, and the gardens he was tending. We talked about the things that matter, the small daily joys and struggles that make up a life. On my last visit, Harold told me something that has stayed with me ever since. "You know, Gabrielle," he said, we were sitting on his porch watching the sunset. "Families are not just the people you are born with or marry into. Families are the people who show up, the ones who tell you the truth, even when it hurts, the ones who choose you over and over again." I thought about my own father, who had not called since my divorce, about Derek, who had chosen deception over love, and about Harold, who had risked his relationship with his son to do what was right. "You showed up for me," I said, "when it mattered most." Harold smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "That is what family does." This Thanksgiving, I am cooking dinner at my house in Portland. Harold will be there, of course. So will a few friends from the hospital, and a neighbor who would otherwise be spending the holiday alone. The turkey is already thawing in the refrigerator, and I have been practicing my grandmother's stuffing recipe for weeks. It will not be the Thanksgiving I imagined a year ago, but I have learned that life rarely goes according to plan. The question is not whether bad things will happen, because they will. The question is what we do when they do. I could have let Derek's betrayal destroy me. I could have become bitter and closed off, convinced that love was just another word for vulnerability and pain. Some days that path would have been easier. But I chose differently. I chose to believe that one person's cruelty does not define all of humanity. I chose to stay open to connection, even knowing the risks. I chose to build a new life on a foundation of truth, rather than continue living in a house of lies. It is not always easy. Some days the old wounds still ache. Some nights I still wonder if I will ever be able to fully trust someone again. But then I remember Harold's words on that dark Thanksgiving evening, when he chose honesty over comfort and integrity over blood. I remember the way he looked at me and said, "You are my daughter." And I realized that I have already been given the greatest gift I could ask for. Not a perfect marriage or an unblemished past, but proof that real love exists, that family can be found in unexpected places, that truth, no matter how painful, is always better than the most beautiful lie. If you are watching this and you have ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, I want you to know something. It is not your fault. The shame belongs to the person who chose to deceive you, not to you for believing in them. And if you are still in the middle of it, still wondering whether to confront the truth or continue living in denial, I hope my story gives you the courage to choose the harder path, because on the other side of that pain is freedom. Freedom from lies, freedom from doubt, freedom to become the person you were always meant to be. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever discovered a secret that changed everything you thought you knew about someone? How did you find the strength to move forward? Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. If this story touched you in any way, share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for being here with me, for listening to my story, for being part of this community. I wish you all a Thanksgiving filled with truth, with genuine connection, and with the kind of family that shows up when it matters most. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.